Bro, he turns into sand? I think I'm gonna have to give that a try. Yeah, so I watched a shit ton, and I can assure you that I'm never doing that again. But I wanted to do it because I wanted to learn sort of how exactly to determine whether or not I should drop a show, because sometimes they have a slow start and it gets better as it builds on potential or promise it shows. But I think I've learned that after the first 2 or 3 episodes, if nothing stands out or it'll seem like it'll just be mediocre, don't deal with it anymore. So yeah, also I'm regretting how I'm doing this from last time a bit because I can. I'm going to add in second cursor seasons for shows that came out over the season, so 86 and Mushoku Tensei will be on here, and I'm going to start making the score whatever I want so it won't necessarily be a defined whole number. Also, I'm going to mention the openings in the beginning for the season because of how many were just really good. JoJo doesn't count though, that's in its own category. It was pretty hard to get Kyokai-sen out of my head some days with a pretty catchy chorus. As much as I didn't enjoy the anime, I thought the opening to Blue Period perfectly encapsulated the tone and atmosphere that the manga built up. Demon Slayer Mugen Train was more Lisa, which is always nice. Senpai's Annoying gave off major Kobayashi vibes, which is always good. I wasn't the biggest fan of the Taktope OP at first, but the more I listened to it, the more I enjoyed it. Sakugan was a funky fun time. Heike Monogatari had a soothing and relaxing aura to it that was very enticing. Vampire Dies in No Time had spooky pop vibes. Platinum End had a sick opening by Maid Band, I think. Osama opening was made by King Gnu, which is always a banger. But the one that tops it, in my opinion, is Cinderella by Sighted Girl. It was a very upbeat and charming opening that somehow didn't feel stale and perfectly conveyed the energy of the show, and man, the drummer in the full song goes really crazy. Now, just like last time, I will not cover any shows that spill over into the next season until the next season, so Osama ranking, Platinum and JoJo will have to wait, but that means I can go over. Watching this made me realize why it's okay to drop shows. I generally had the idea that I should stick to something through to the end because I have this tendency to leave things incomplete, aka my entire backlog of games. But I think just watching the first 2 or 3 episodes are generally a good indicator of whether or not you think a series will be worth your time, as I found out this season. But I got too far in to give up, so yeah, I watched all of it, even if my phone was out sometimes. Most of the time. I should probably preface, comedy is extremely subjective. If you like this, then cool. And if you're not sure, watch the trailer or an episode and see if you like it, because if you do, then it's pretty much like that the whole season. But I'm sorry. I think the thing that stood out to me most was just how annoying it felt. Nothing was funny to me because almost everyone was irritating and unenjoyable. I think I first learned this when I watched Konosuba, but it was definitely reaffirmed when watching this, but I don't think bratty characters are that funny. They tend to do something stupid and or incompetent, which is a big part of comedy, but then they realize what they've done was stupid and sort of cry or sulk about it until someone else fixes it, and it's just really frustrating for me to watch. There really wasn't anything that special otherwise. The animation was whatever, same thing with the soundtrack, and yeah. I guess Jahy had a cool design, but that's about it. 3 out of 10. Aquatope was a bit interesting because although I enjoyed it, it felt like a series that could have had just 12 episodes instead of 24. There's so many episodes where not much happened, and I guess that should be expected with a slice of life, but usually they're charming or funny or unbearably boring, but these nothing episodes were none of the above. It's hard to describe because although I didn't feel like I was wasting my time while watching them, I definitely wasn't invested in what was happening. Maybe if it had been the whole show, it would have bothered me more, but because they were placed fairly intermittently, then it didn't bother me as much. Still, it was about half the show or more, and it could have done without it because the rest of the show was actually pretty enjoyable. The first half has Kukuru go through a breakup of her childhood, and it's actually heartbreaking. Coupled with a cute cast and gorgeous scenery, it definitely had these moments of desperation of wanting to maintain the past. There are moments when Kukuru is annoyingly adamant about trying to keep the aquarium alive, and as she starts to realize that it's an inevitability that it's gone, it's kind of bittersweet because you feel for her, but you know that it's best she accept it and move on. The second half had her go through the rounds by doing something that she didn't initially want to do. It forced her to live with the idea that sometimes to get by, she can't always do what she wants or is good at. There are moments that feel really lonely throughout this half, and it definitely added to the show. Overall, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10 because I definitely don't think I'd rewatch it, and I'd have a hard time recommending this to someone who doesn't like slice of life type stuff, because some of it felt really unnecessary, and although I didn't hate it, I definitely thought that it brought down what made the rest of the show interesting to me. Also, I could totally see myself watching an anime from PA Works that's just about sea life. The fish look so cool in the show, no lie. So this is kind of a special case because normally I wouldn't review a series that I dropped halfway through, and I honestly never drop a series halfway through, but I dropped it in far enough and I wanted to give my thoughts. I don't think I'll do something like this in the future unless something similar happens. Basically, a few months ago, prior to this airing in June, I read and caught up with the Blue Period manga, and it instantly shot up as probably the best manga I've read so far that's easily among my favorites. Granted, I still have a big ass list to get through, but even so, I find it hard to believe this won't stay in my top 10 for a long time unless it really drops the ball later on. Seeing it adapted was interesting because it was the first time I read a manga prior to the anime, and while I was watching it, I just thought, God, I wish I was reading the manga. Which was kind of odd because sure, the animation was stiff and the soundtrack was whatever, but it still covered 90% of what was in the manga. I don't believe there are any changes to the story or major developments that were left out from the 6.5 episodes that I watched. This really bothered me because it seemed like the core of it was still there, but I really wasn't enjoying it nearly as much. So for the last half episode that I watched, I put the manga chapter it adapted right next to it and tried to compare the two to see what it was that was so bothersome. This is the chapter right before the first exam for any spoilers. For starters, there's a large difference in atmosphere. The manga has lighting that is incomprehensible sometimes that creates a mood unlike any other. It's really hard to describe, so I won't right now, but the anime just doesn't have any of it. There's also a large emphasis on movements and especially facial expressions. I think what really stood out to me while I was reading the manga is just the author's ability to take these snippets of time that are kinda ugly, but express so well exactly what's happening with the individual. The ugliness just makes it feel more human. Like, look at the anime. That scene looks like a throwaway, whereas in the manga you can so easily recognize the swirl of emotions in him as each of his weak points are being exposed right in front of him. Or look at this scene. Nothing is conveyed well. Look at the manga. His eyes are close together, looking slightly down, the forehead is furrowed, the hands are unevenly clawing at his already crumpled shirt, all with a worried smile trying to keep it together as he realizes that he might not enjoy what he set out to do. It's frightening, and it clearly shows in the manga. To be fair to the studio, I remember when I was reading it, I had no idea how this could transfer well into anime format without some sort of KyoAni or Shaft type production, because those are the only two studios off the top of my head that can so readily make slice of life titles like this just so beautiful. With that said, this is still quite subpar. If I'm rating this based on how it's adapted, it would be like a 2, but since it's still Blue Period, it's really hard to say. I think if I hadn't read the manga, I would have enjoyed this much more, and that fact slightly irritates me. I don't know whether or not I'm judging this as an adaptation or a show, so it's possible it's not as bad as I make it out to be. Along with the fact that I absolutely love it, meaning I probably would have had problems with it even if the anime was near perfect. So my experience with it is probably like a 4 out of 10, but if you're vehemently against reading a manga, maybe give it a shot. My only wish is that people experience it somehow because I absolutely adore Blue Period. This one went so far under the radar for me, probably more so than Osama, but god damn am I glad I still picked it up. Heike Monogatari tells the downfall of the Heike clan and the story of those along with it. The start was a bit slow, but they built up characters and the foreboding downfall of the clan so well that it all culminated in such a brilliant ending and last few episodes in general. The visuals were beautifully shot and so well directed, from some of the fights and battles to Bio's retelling of the events or the environment surrounding her. It was all just so calm. The soundtrack was also really well done. Actually, who did it? Oh, that makes sense. One of the best to do it did it, so that's a plus. I would probably say that my biggest complaint or criticism is just how literally everybody looks the same, and since they're a clan, they all have very similar names, aka they all end in Mori. So it got really confusing to keep track of who is who. Even these two look the exact same with the exception of their eyebrows. So a lot of my focus was on the names, and with all the moving events, I inevitably ended up getting confused along the way. But if you're good with names and faces and you can get through a somewhat slow start, you're in for a brilliant journey. The whole story kind of reminded me of the game What Remains of Edith Finch, if you've ever played that, in the sense that each person within the Heike had some sort of downfall related to both their personality and the demise of the clan. Anyways, 8 out of 10. Mieruko was probably the most consistently okay show that I watched every week. It had some gritty animation for the ghosts that was always such a large contrast to the rest of the animation, which made it pretty well done in my book. The direction was also intriguing because of what I'll call the duality of anime. On one hand, there were some cool ideas, like when during an episode Miko would see a ghost that the audience couldn't see and you got to be an outsider looking in as if you were just noticing what she was doing, and at the end of the episode you got to see why she reacted. And on the other hand, we have thighs, tits, and pussy. So yeah, just take that as you will. It didn't take away from the show as much as you would think, but it was very obvious whenever it was presented. The biggest problem with the show, though, is how the build-up is not worth the payoff. Every time a ghost appears on screen, you kind of figure she'll get out of it in some way, so when the build-up for it is so grudgingly long, it's a big turnoff, and the payoff would sometimes be funny or sometimes relieving, but the overall payoff and build-up never equaled. I will admit, even if I did expect Miko to get out of it, there was always some tension, but I also think there could have been more tension if I was aware of what would happen if she had actually seen the ghosts. There were bad things that happened to ghosts, but as far as I remember, there wasn't anything that happened to a human, and withholding that information made it hard to get invested in some of the scenarios. Maybe the idea was that because you don't know, you don't want to find out, but after going through the whole season, I still think I would have rather known than not. Anyways, the cast was cute enough, and the soundtrack wasn't terrible. 5 out of 10. The Vampire Dies in No Time was really hit or miss with its jokes. I would watch one episode to see if you're interested, and if not, then don't bother. I think that it relied way too heavily on weird looking things and dicks, boobs, sex, stuff like that for the punchline, but sometimes it was funny. For example, there's a whole bit about micro bikinis, which I didn't really like because it felt like, ha, look, naked, funny. But since they acted like zombies, there was a small joke about how he's infected and has to go before he turns, which I found genuinely funny. If there was a slightly more diverse range of what the punchlines would be, then this could have been a really good comedy. The voice actors were great. Ronaldo is the same voice actor as Shirogane, and he's such a treat to listen to. His back and forths and delivery are all fantastic. Strelick was also fairly good, and I didn't notice anyone who was bad. The animation was serviceable, and the soundtrack sounded nice. It just really came down to how much I found funny, how much I found tolerable, and how much it was cringe. I would say I found most of it tolerable, but I at least got one good laugh out of each episode, which I think bumps it up to a 6 out of 10. Also, John is precious. I don't have much to say about this show. I really don't want to say the title, it just sounds dumb. It was cute, fluffy, funny nearly every minute of the way there. Smooth animation and some small touches added to it. Look at how Takeda moves here, or the little eye movements from Kazuma. It's just neat and really adds some flavor to it. It's nice, and it had me smiling every episode. That's about it. If you like this fluffy stuff, watch it. If not, don't, and if you haven't tried it, then this is a good start. 7 out of 10. Also, the same voice actor for her grandpa voices Tortko, which I could not get over. I loved it. You know, when the trailer looks awesome and 80% of what was in the trailer is in the first episode, you kind of get worried because what's being shown off in the trailer are the good scenes, right? Well, if all the good scenes are in the first episodes, though, what's in the rest? Yeah, to be honest, I was a little disappointed with this one. I loved Vivi's back when it came out, so I was hoping to get something similar to that, but it was alright. The main duo had sometimes interesting banter together, and Lenny's a Chad, but there wasn't much depth to any of the characters. They were cute to watch sometimes, sure, but overall fairly stale. I really liked the setting of it. I don't know how many anime have this diner off-road type vibe to it, and it was pretty cool to see it be done. The animation was good for the most part, although some scenes were especially stiff, so I can't really say it was great. The soundtrack is ironically probably the least notable thing about the show. I don't remember a single track all that well besides the opening. This isn't to say it was bad by any means, but for a show all about music, you would think that it would be pretty good. I still listen to some of the tracks from Vivi's, which has to say something about its soundtrack, but I don't really think I'll be listening to anything from this show anytime soon. The one thing that definitely stood out to me were the character designs for the music arts. Seriously, all of them were distinct, colorful, unique, but you could always tell it was a music art and not just some random girl in the whack clothes. Even some of the background music arts looked amazing. I really hope that the person who did the character designs for this comes back for something else. Anyways, it was a fairly standard plot, nothing special or innovative about it. I enjoyed it, but I'm unsure whether or not I'd recommend it, and I definitely don't have plans to watch it again. 6 out of 10. Also, it gave me this line, which has to count for something.
Oh, Jesus.
Sakugan taught me to never look at the first episode to determine whether or not a show is good. To go into detail, the first episode was pretty solid. There was a lot of nice back and forth between Gagamba and Memempu that kept me interested, and they built up what I thought was going to be a lost dad that's had trouble connecting with his daughter, and a daughter that wants to be her own person, all the while creating a little mystery of whatever this place is. There was a nice soundtrack that actually stayed pretty consistently good throughout the series, and the animation was decent as long as there wasn't CGI on screen. As I said though, this didn't last long at all because each subsequent episode was boring, uninteresting, and shallow. The dialogue between Memempu and Gagumba was lost, and as those interactions faded, it was revealed that Gagumba isn't really a struggling parent, he's just an idiot, and I lost anything that made me care for him. Memempu was okay, just uninteresting, and as for the rest, I really couldn't care less about them. Nothing really made them interesting or fun to watch. The actual plot or world was pretty dumb. Most of the episodes felt like one thing happened and then 20 minutes of filler. For instance, there was an episode where they went delusional from fake flowers, and to cure it, they needed a cactus, but it was a fake cactus, so everything just got worse. I'm honestly unsure why it had to be a whole episode, but it was. They switched the main baddies from the kaiju to whoever these people are, which was probably for the best, but I had no idea why or what their purpose was. If it seems like my criticisms are all over the place, blame the show, not me. Would not recommend it. 3 out of 10. What a blessing of a show Komi Can't Communicate was. With stunning direction and great animation to go with a fun and upbeat soundtrack, it was a great time to appreciate how much love went into adapting the series. Some of the opening shots of the first episode were truly mesmerizing, and it stayed fairly consistent throughout the whole show. The voice actress did a great job of this, and I mean, she really did. It was actually one of the most exciting things in the show whenever Komi talked. It's unbelievable. The rest of the supporting cast did their job well. Most of the comedy landed either a little or a lot. There were many jokes that revolved around Komi being a god, but she doesn't really know how to react because she doesn't think of herself that way, which was a bit cute. Some of the cast was kind of annoying, but the main ones with Najimi, Tadano, and Komi were sufficient and cute enough to the point where it didn't really bring down the show that much. The only two characters that had some depth to them were Tadano and Komi, which definitely made them the best. It was heartwarming to see Komi try and express her feelings, and Tadano try to translate for her while still being a little flustered that he's so close to such an elegant person. It was adorable. That's about it. There's a huge blow up online about the Netflix subtitles. Personally, it got a bit annoying, sure, but I don't think it ruined the show, and I also don't blame the show for it. It's Netflix's fault, not theirs. In any case, it was still a treat each week. 8 out of 10. Man, it's been a while since I've immediately missed a show after watching it. I love this show. Everyone, everything. It's great. There's beautiful animation in both the background and cities, to the brilliant fights, to the facial expressions, to the bread. The soundtrack creates a fantastical atmosphere, and I believe there are at least 3, maybe even 4 different opening songs for a 12-episode part. The amount of love and consideration that went into the show is astounding. The voice acting was top-notch, the direction for some of the shots were incredible. People even spoke different languages when they were supposed to speak different languages. That's wild. There wasn't a single moment that I wasn't interested in what was happening, even the dumbass like 2.5-minute monologue over a fucking figurine of Roxy. And to go along with that, there were assuredly moments or scenes of dumb loot shit, but to be clear, I found it funny, and as something that Rudy is working on, if not actively, at least subconsciously. I won't spoil too much, but there's a clear change in his way of thinking towards the end of the second part than there was during a specific scene during the first part, and after the second turning point, he seems to have a slightly more mature air to him. He's working through it, and honestly, as long as this is just the beginning, which I sincerely hope it is, then I feel fine laughing at the dumb shit he does. Besides that though, he's an incredible character to watch, going back and forth between the old him and new him, dealing with familial and outside relationships and the tendency to actually be a competent companion for others around him while still having other drawbacks, like being a bit naive considering he did get captured twice, and as Paul pointed out, he does have a tendency to get tunnel vision in his goals. He's obviously not perfect, but he's working through it with his second chance, because that's what this show is all about, a second chance. Anyways, the supporting cast was great. There was an episode dedicated to Roxy which made me tear up, and the fall episodes definitely held the weight to them. It was great to see Rujo change, and Eris is adorable as always, although the ending definitely made me want to see a bit more, but god damn it, I guess I'll have to wait. I give Mushoku Tensei a 9 out of 10. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about spoilers, so skip to the next one if you don't want that. Alright, there's your warning now, go. So I was looking up how many light novels there were to see how many were adapted and how many episodes total could be adapted from it, and I think around 4 seasons totaling around 100 episodes is possible if everything is adapted, but I read the description for web novel number 6, and at the end of it, it says this. This wasn't conveyed, was it? I don't remember that, like, at all. I just thought he was depressed that she left. It seems very interesting that this would just be left out, but maybe it'll be realized in later seasons, assuming that there are some. Oh, and now that the people who don't want spoilers are gone, can we talk about how people understandably lost their shit when Rudy nearly forced himself onto Eris? Well, is no one going to talk about the fact that Eris literally fucked Rudy for what I assume is her own personal pleasure and then just like skedaddled? Like, let me remind you, Rudy is a virgin shut-in NEET that is trying his best at a second life, and god damn it, he was so close, he was even hesitant after she jumped on him. But it was all doomed to this legendary line, don't get me wrong. I mean, it wasn't even the line itself. If anyone says, oh, my mom said this to me and it's a little embarrassing, so I'll only say it once, whatever comes next will be irresistible, I'm sure. The point is, fucking people and telling them that there's more to it when there isn't is emotionally damaging and also not okay. All I'm saying is that there should be 2 conversations or no conversations.
ねえルードゥス、お母様から習ったのだけど、恥ずかしいから1回しか言わないわ。
Oh, Jesus.
I'm writing this a bit prematurely because the schedule for 86 is a little fucked up right now, but I think I have enough to give my thoughts on this brilliant follow-up to part 1. I love the deep dive into Shin. He's a cold demeanored character with so much weight that bogs him down that it's caused him to almost disconnect with reality. The only time that he feels is when he fights because it's the only thing that he wants. I can't get into too much without spoilers, but trust me, whenever he's on screen, I've never lost interest. That's most of this part though. The rest of the characters, including Lena, take a backseat, which is fine in my opinion since they're able to draw out so much from Shin. Frederica has been fairly prominent, and to be fair, I thought she would be annoying, but so far she's been fairly charming as the younger sister type. Not overly, but still cute in other areas. She's also a driving force for Shin that I appreciate, trying to help him realize his value. So far, she's been great. There's amazing direction with this series as there was with part 1, with cool transitions, shots, and just little touches like the little twitch Shin made with Frederica. Seriously, any other anime would have had him either not react or make an absurdly apparent grunt, so it's refreshing to see something like this. The soundtrack reminds me of Attack on Titan, which is awesome. Seriously, trying to mimic Hiroyuki Sawano is... oh my fucking god, I'm an idiot. The animation is stellar. It took me quite a while to figure out that the Micos were CG. They just look so good, especially during the action scenes. 86 is a good show. Don't listen to this guy. 8.5 out of 10. So a lot of YouTubers do like a what to watch or whatever, but there's so many of them that I don't really think there's a point in me doing it. Instead, I'll just give a completely out there prediction of what I hope and pray will be the next hidden gem without seeing anything other than the trailers. And I think I have the perfect one to start this idea. There's absolutely one trailer I cannot get my eyes off, and it's Sabikui Bisco, otherwise known as Rust Eater Bisco. What is this? Well, honestly, I have no clue. It just looks so cool. Japan has turned to rust and you have to find the legendary mushroom while riding hippos with machine guns and big-ass crabs. That sounds awesome. And I mean, like, come on, if this doesn't make you feel something you haven't felt before, I don't want to know what the hell you've been up to. The music goes so hard in the trailer. I haven't felt anything like that since the Death Note opening. The studio is new, so there isn't any record to go off, but the animation directors have done stuff for Code Geass and Attack on Titan, and the screenwriter did Perfect Blue, which is enough for me. The 4 voice actors are pretty cool. Your protagonist is your boy Ishigami, and his partner is the GOAT who voices Tanjiro Odokawa, Vanitas Kosei, and so much more. The 2 women presented are Nikaido from Dorohedoro and Riko and Miko from Made in Abyss and Kaguya-sama respectively. So they're good on that front. Now I have no clue if this will be good, it's not a guarantee, but damn, I really hope it is, and I'll at least check out the first 3 or so episodes. I'll probably tweet about whether or not I'll drop it after that. So yeah, that's it. It's finally over. I'm never doing so many in one season like this again. There's just no point. I do think it was a good learning experience, but Jesus, did it take a lot out of me. I'm gonna watch the 2 that are spilling over and JoJo whenever that comes out, plus Vanitas' second curve. Attack on Titan and Demon Slayer will be binged at some point during the season, but otherwise it's up in the air what else I'll watch. Again, I'll check out the first few episodes of Sabikui Bisco, but if my prediction is wrong, which it very well may be, I'm just gonna drop it. There are some interesting ones like all the Cloverworks productions and Sasuke to Miyano, but I'm gonna wait at least like 6 episodes to see the reaction. That's it. That's it. I'm done. I'm not thinking about anime for like 2 weeks. I'm just gonna binge some games. So yeah, see ya.